All right. Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be here today with some really amazing leaders in the venture capital industry. Between the three of them, they have invested in dozens of companies that you know and probably even use today, and those companies have created billions of dollars in value. These investors are leaders in the industry and true champions of the innovation economy. Please welcome Aileen Lee of Cowboy Ventures, Scott Sandell of NEA, and Andrew Braccia of Excel. My name is Linnea Geis. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of PDI Software and a past board member of Venture Atlantic. Thank you so much for joining us. So why don't you each start just by introducing yourselves and share the story of how you each got into the venture game and to where you are today.
I'm Aileen. Nice to meet you. I'm happy to be here. I got into venture by accident. I was working actually at Gap during the dot-com boom in 1999 and at the Gap.com part. And there's just a lot of exciting stuff happening in tech. And I wound up getting a call from a recruiter who was looking for someone to join a venture firm called Kleiner Perkins in Menlo Park, California. And I had heard of venture. I didn't know very much about it. I didn't have any friends in the business. I actually thought maybe I shouldn't take the call. Most venture firms were all guys at the time, and including Kleiner. And I didn't really want to be the first woman. And I was very fortunate that the recruiter was a female, and she was like, "Hey, if you want the world to change, you're well positioned for this job. And if you don't take the interview, I don't think women will ever join this industry." And so that really got me. So I decided to go on the interview, and then I wound up going to Kleiner Perkins and staying for 12 years, and then started my own firm, Cowboy Ventures, 8 years ago, and we're seed stage investors.
Andrew, tell us about you.
Sure. Andrew Braccia with Excel Partners. Excel is a venture firm based here in the Bay Area and has been around for close to 40 years. I joined Excel about a little over 13 years ago. I spent the first close to decade of my career in an operational role at Yahoo and really enjoyed that time in terms of getting just up to speed with the role the technology was playing specifically in consumer lives, which is interesting because I've not been a very effective consumer investor now that I've been at Excel for 13 years. I have found my way to do more enterprise and software investing, but joined when the firm was still really just focused primarily on early stage venture capital here in the U.S. And over the last decade or so, we've really expanded our charter here at Excel and globalized the firm and grown its presence both in Europe as well as in India, and just most recently also started to invest across many different stages, not just the early stage part of the business, which is the core platform for Excel, but also in our growth equity practice as well. And so thank you for having me, and looking forward to a great discussion.
So Scott, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the venture game and where you are today?
Sure. Thanks, Linnea. I got in the venture business 25 years ago when I was helping a company raise money. And they approached me afterwards and said, we're not interested in investing in that company, but would you like to join NEA? And so that started a conversation that led to me joining NEA in January of 1996 as an associate. 3 years ago, I became the managing partner of the firm. And in between, I've been mostly focused on investing in software companies, which is my passion.
Good. Well, so we were just asking next, what kind of trends are you interested in investing in now? And Andrew just finished his answer. So Aileen, why don't you tell us what trends are really interesting to you right now? Where are you spending your time?
Yeah, so we're at Cowboy Ventures, we're seed stage investors. So we are generally looking to partner with founders when they're raising their first institutional round. When I started as a seed investor, that was sometimes $500,000, sometimes $1 million. Now, oftentimes it's a $2 or $3 or $4 million round. And we invest in both consumer and enterprise businesses. So we are doing similar to what Andrew shared. The tech is just an incredible driving force of change and innovation increasingly around the world. We focus on just investing in the US, but across the US. We do a lot of enterprise software investing. We're really interested in what we call unsexy tech. So basically, there's just lots of industries, especially functions that customers don't see. There aren't like really front office functions, but things that are maybe back office, financial, logistics, supply chain, operational, so like functions that are still running on pen and paper or really old, outdated software. And the markets are now ready and big enough to be able to support, we think, really huge new innovative software companies. We also invest in developer tools, infrastructure, security, and then on the consumer side, lots of collaboration, distance learning. We're really excited about. I think, unfortunately, because of COVID, lots of people have realized that healthcare, a lot of it can be done remotely. And so we're excited about new opportunities for consumers to be able to take healthcare into their own hands and things that are delivered direct to the consumer. Those are just some of them, I guess.
So you're all part of partnerships, and I think it's an interesting question and a conversation to talk about how you walk the line between challenging convention and supporting ideas that are really new and at the leading edge, and building consensus internally where you have to kind of bring your partnership along. So some investments must be harder to sell than others. And would any of you care to share some of those particularly hard sells where you really had to champion a deal internally?
Well, I'm happy to start. I mean, I'm sure this is the same story in every venture partnership, but the best ideas are very seldom obvious to everyone. So, because we have a consensus-oriented culture, you'll often get very vigorous debate. But at the end of the day, we trust individuals to make those hard calls. We know that a sponsoring partner is closer to a company in a situation than the rest of us could ever be, no matter what amount of due diligence has been done or presentations they might make to us. So our style is that we'll have very vigorous debates, but at the end of the day, we leave the final decision usually in the hands of the sponsoring partners for the most part.
Yeah, I mean, we have a very similar culture. I think, as Scott mentioned, I think that, venture firms depend so much on the intellectual curiosity and belief systems of the partners that they've been investing in over many years to make decisions and to know a market and understand an entrepreneur better than that of anyone else in the firm. And so we have a culture that really tries to provide a platform for investors to be able to really push the envelope and make what they believe is the best decision. And we, we'll spend time making sure that we provide feedback and context, and to the extent that people have pattern recognition in certain sectors or industries or certain connectivity to entrepreneurial communities, we'll have a very open and candid dialogue, but around all of those things. But in the end, it really is our investment philosophy at the partnership level is really driven by the courage of conviction of an individual partner, and we don't want to do anything that gets in the way of that. We want to create a culture that enables that, and that's really important for us in terms of making sure that we're taking the appropriate amount of risk and building a portfolio that is diverse, both in the types of companies that we've invested in, but also the risk profile of those companies.
Aileen, you're in a smaller partnership now.
Yeah, actually, I'm probably part of the reason why our partnership is smaller is, I lived through our partnership getting a lot bigger. I think it's a lot more complicated. But I do think at the end of the day, like these guys said, it's about trust among partners, and that you build a system where, we have to be taking risk. And the partners and the team that spent the most time with the founders and understand their vision the best, like we're really trusting their judgment, because I think if you asked a lot of venture partnerships, a lot of their best outcomes were actually somewhat controversial decisions. Like not, the ones that are, if you just make all the down the middle decisions that everyone agrees on, you often won't actually have as much alpha in your portfolio. And then for us at Seed, you can't do that much diligence on the product or on the financial plan or on customers. A lot of times they need the money to build the product. So it really comes down to judgment about people and taking risk on people who haven't actually built their thing yet, and figuring out whether you think the people can do it. And that's really just about spending time with them. And ideally, the velocity of the venture market doesn't make this so easy right now, but meeting them over like multiple weeks so you can really see how their thinking has changed and get to know them over the course of a number of meetings instead of just like in one day which actually sometimes happens.
Wow, that's crazy. Yeah. Okay. Any stories from your own portfolio about something that seemed really like a harder sell at a particular time that seems really obvious now?
I have to think about when you were asking about like tough decisions, and I think about we're investors in a company called Guild Education that is doing quite well, and we're really excited about it. But when we heard the Guild pitch, it was two women at Stanford, and they had a lot of passion about folks who are having a hard time kind of getting career momentum going, and in particular, people who had never finished high school or college. And so what they had done was they basically came up with like a 4-hour reboot your career boot camp. And they basically had posted on Craigslist, like, hey, come to our career seminar. It's free. It's 4 hours. And they were renting out remnant strip mall space and doing boot camps for careers. And that's what their business, like, it wasn't really a business because it was free. And so, and the idea was there's a lot of people who are hourly workers who are patching together a living and don't have a lot of career mobility, and we want to help them. And we think we should probably have software and figure out how to do it remotely or over the internet, but right now we're doing it live. And we think, it's a really big market, but there was no founding technologist, there was no software, there wasn't really a vision for how we were going to scale it. And now we actually partner with employers, and we are an enterprise company, and like Walmart and Disney and some of the biggest employers of hourly workers in America are our partners, where we actually help their employees get an education and be on a better path. But it's like been a complete change from like Craigslist to Walmart.
Totally.
And it was really about taking a bet on like the market's big and very underserved. There aren't a lot of solutions for this. And can these people figure something out?
Okay. So that kind of brings up the topic though of pivots, because not every deal sort of finishes the same way it started. Anybody want to tell a story about some of their favorite or most notable pivots in your portfolio?
We invested in a wonderful company called Tuya, Tuya. And I'm sure none of you have ever heard of this company. That's partly to do with the fact that it's located in Hangzhou, China. But when we invested in the company, we had a 1-hour meeting in a hotel in Shanghai, and the founders so impressed us. They had started a company which was acquired by Alibaba. While they were at Alibaba, they had invented the Ali Cloud, or built the Ali Cloud, with a team of about 200 engineers. And then they decided that they had a vision for something else, and they wanted to go off and start their own company. So they went off to do that. We gave them $5 million, and maybe about 2 years into it, I'll never forget this meeting. The founders came back to us and they said, we've concluded that this really isn't working, and we're wondering if we have to give you the money back, because we still have 3 of the $5 million in the bank or something like that. And I'd never been asked by an entrepreneur, do we have to give you the money back before? So I sort of chuckled to myself and I said, well, just out of curiosity, do you have another idea, something else you might want to pursue with the remaining $3 million? And they suddenly lit up and they said, oh yeah, no, we have this idea. We've been actually working on it for quite a while now. And we think that, all of these device manufacturers, appliance manufacturers here in China, they all want to make their devices smart, and none of them really know how. And so we think we could build a solution for that. And that's what today would be called an IoT platform, Internet of Things. They have something like 80,000 products on this platform today. It'll be a public company next year. But that's not what we invested in. We invested in, some very talented engineers out of Alibaba who fell flat on their face with the first idea and had the guts to come up with another one.
Wow, that's fascinating. Andrew?
Sure. I mean, obviously the famous one for Excel and for me is the Slack story. And, Slack, the founders of Slack, Stuart Butterfield and Cal Henderson, Sergey, and Eric Costello were also founders and early employees of Flickr, one of the defining Web 2.0 companies back in the mid part of the 2000s. And when Stuart left Yahoo, he decided he wanted to build a new company, and he had a couple of different ideas. One of them was, this was during sort of the financial crisis, so one of his ideas was to build a bank. an online bank, and his second idea was to basically redevelop a product or a game that he initially developed before he pivoted that into Flickr, which was a game called Game Never Ending. And so he went back to the well, decided not to do the bank, and decided to do Game Never Ending Part 2, which became the game Glitch, which was developed over 2 to 3 years. And by the end of that third year, it was pretty clear that Glitch wasn't going to be the business that was going to define the next 10 to 20 years of Stewart and his team's career. And they made a decision to shut it down, and then thought through whether or not they wanted to, basically just give back what capital was left to their investors. And I think we all had a great discussion. John O'Farrell at Andreessen Horowitz was also an investor. He did the Series B in Slack. And we all had a great discussion around trying to leverage the team's talents and insights into something new and exciting. And what ended up happening was, when they were building that game Glitch, they built a lot of internal tooling for their team. And that internal tooling was basically chat, sort of new innovative ways to be built on top of IRC and integrations that went into that. And Stewart just fundamentally felt like that there was an opportunity to define that category and build a business around, team communication. And that started off with, 5 or 6 people developing a really lightweight team communication tool that was originally called, I believe it was called Honeycomb, was our first idea for a name. And then we moved into deciding that Slack was a great name for a variety of different reasons. And, Slack went from a small little pivot and new project to, the public company that it is today. And we've been very fortunate, very blessed to be a part of the journey, all the way from the seed investment to multiple rounds of venture investments to actually growth investments as well. I think it probably is the company that as a firm, we've invested probably the largest amount of investment that we've ever made in one company over a period of 7 or 8 years.
Talking more about the market now, it's obviously a really healthy time for the exit environment as well, to have corporate M&A teams active, viable public markets, new vehicles like SPACs. How are you partnering with your teams now to choose sort of the right path and timing, and any notable trends from the market today that you think entrepreneurs should be keeping an eye on?
Yeah, well, I'm not sure I'm intimately familiar with the SPAC market, although I think I understand some of the basic ideas around it. But maybe I'll just comment, just generally speaking, on its. If you look at the state of the public markets as it relates to technology companies, there's a massive amount of appreciation that has found its way into very large multiples that are being paid for these different technology assets, whether that be in the public markets or the private markets. And much of that has to do, obviously, with just the massive reacceleration of many of these businesses in a world where people are beginning to work from home and have to adopt a lot of new technologies. There's obviously the impact of the macroeconomic impact of a really low interest rate environment, and capital looking for a return in the public markets as well. This is a great time for a young and predictable technology company to go public. There's no doubt about that. If you look at the last several months of public offerings, whether you look at the Snowflake public offering, the Sumo Logic public offering, just recently, I think as of yesterday, the Palantir and Asana public offering, this is a great time to go public. And how long that continues, what the driving forces are going to be that enable that to last as long as possible, I think are still somewhat up in the air. And we try not to be market timers as investors, because it's a really hard business to time. We try to build really great businesses that are built to last, during many different types of ups and downs and in the macro economy. And And so, that's our main focus. And then from there, when a company is ready to go public, we're gonna take it public. Or if a company is going to look to the M&A market for an exit, we're going to be supportive of it in that case as well. So that's my general take on what's happening.
I guess what I would add on to that, I agree with everything Andrew said, but I think there's been obviously a backdrop of a buildup of illiquidity in the private markets, because the number of companies going public has compressed so much in the last 20 years. Used to be there were about 250 companies a year that would go public, and there were a long list of investment banks that were capable of doing that. Nowadays, through some regulatory changes, that industry is consolidated down to a small number of banks that are active in taking companies public, the result of which is now about 70 of them go public per year, which leaves a lot of them sort of stranded as private companies looking either for an M&A home or something else. And on the other side of that equation, a lot of the public market investors who used to enjoy investing in these smaller IPOs 20 years ago have been sort of waiting around for this product to come to market and have the ability to invest in it as a public company. They've sort of leaped over the fence and begun actively investing on the private side as well. And I think that's what has created the backdrop for the SPAC market, since I know that's what you really wanted to talk about, Linnea. The SPAC market exists because there's a very constrained part of the pipeline between private and public through this IPO channel. And the SPAC creates an alternative way for companies to become public. And I think it's here to stay because, the investors on the other side of those SPACs are the very same investors who invest in IPOs. And that was never before true in the SPAC market. The SPAC market has been around for a long time, but only recently have very high quality investors been looking for companies to go public through the SPAC process and supporting them. So we've had 2 companies go public in the last couple of weeks. I think there are a couple hundred SPACs that have been formed, and they're very actively looking to make investments and acquisitions of companies in all of our portfolios.
And by the way, to Scott's point there, I remember when I joined Excel, 14 or so years ago, I could count on one hand the number of companies that, had $100 million of recurring revenue. And I look at our portfolio today, our private portfolio, and there's probably 30 to 40 companies that have that level of scale. But many of them, are still private and will be private for some time, given a lot of the conditions that Scott laid out in terms of, investor interest, the size the company needs to be to go public, the access to the capital markets and the private markets, be able to sustain and grow privately for longer periods of time. It's actually fascinating to just see how much has changed just in the last 10 to 15 years since I've been in the business.
Yeah, that's true. One thing, Andrew, you and I also talked about a little bit was the corporate M&A market is also getting bigger. And so it used to be that there were a number of firms, but it wasn't a huge number of firms that would be very active consistently in the market with M&A. And it feels like now there's an emerging next tier of companies that are very regularly writing sizable checks. And that's another good avenue for entrepreneurs to find an exit.
Absolutely. I mean, obviously the big have gotten really big. If you look at the market capitalization of Apple and Microsoft and Amazon and Google, those companies are just enormous. That probably also lends to more scrutiny over what they do. But I think the thing that people sometimes don't realize is that there's a whole new crop of technology companies that have been built over the past couple of decades, whether it be Atlassian, which is a $40+ billion company and a company that we were early investors in, ServiceNow, which I'll get the market caps wrong because it's changing so drastically every week, but I believe it's like a 70 or 80 billion dollar company. Workday, Zoom, the list goes on and on and on. Salesforce at $220 or $250 billion. These are large companies that have shown an appetite historically to acquire and integrate. And I think you're going to see, that continue to be the case. Now, that being said, they obviously are trading well in their own right, but so are the private market companies, and so it's not a cheap transaction environment right now. And so from that perspective, I think there's a double-edged sword to the market today. There's a lot of enthusiasm and interest, but there's also a reality that things are expensive, and you have to really stand behind a vision and stand behind an idea if you're an acquirer, to want to have to pay the premium to what is already a really expensive, and many times rightfully so, market today.
Aileen, you're early stage in the cycle, so you're probably not spending too much time thinking about exits at your investment thesis. But any thoughts or comments on the environment now?
No, I think we always think about, we don't think necessarily when we're getting in at seed, like who would we sell this company to? But, it's always helpful to study companies that when they started didn't seem like they were in a big market, and how big these companies have grown. Right. And we also, probably all of us internally, have conversations about companies that, Zoom is a perfect example, right? Zoom had a really hard time fundraising, is my understanding, because WebEx existed, and Google, and Microsoft, Google, lots of companies were giving away free products. And so there was a lot of disbelief that you could build a really large independent public company in the space when free products are available. So you're always using the massive success of kind of companies that didn't seem like they were going into no-brainer markets to make sure that you're checking your investment process, that you would have made the right call had you had the opportunity to meet Eric when he was pitching Zoom.
All right, everyone, that was part one of a wonderful conversation with our great Midas list venture capitalists. We've got part two coming up tomorrow.